Hi, everybody. This is Rose with the Innovation Podcast. And today we have with us Jeff Pye from Fractional HR. How you doing today, Jeff?
Good, Rose. How are you today?
I'm really good. And I'm going to give Jeff a moment to tell you all about Lune Group, which is actually the name of this fractional HR company. And but you know, as we do in all of our podcasts, before we jump into the business and the innovation, we like to know a little bit about our guests and who are they, what makes them tick. And could you give us a little insight into who you are, Jeff?
Yeah, Rose, I would love to. First off, I'd love to, thank you for inviting me on the podcast today. As we've talked about before, I think innovation is a huge, huge factor in any small business, and I love that we're talking about that here. I think it's good to bring awareness to it. So thank you for having me on the podcast today. I'm honored to be here, honestly, truly. But I'll give you a little bit of background about myself. So my name, like Rose said, is Jeff Pye. I was born and raised in New York, where I lived for almost my entire life. And throughout my career, and I tell everybody, really, I started my career working at the ripe age of 13 years old. My family owned a series of restaurants on Long Island in New York. And I've been working in the restaurant since a very, very young age, obviously. And at the age of 13 was really when, I started going in and card handling, back of house, front of house. We're doing accounting, bookkeeping, reconciling the books at the end of the night, making sure the till is even and balanced out with all the receipts. All these things that go into business, I was really learning even before I really went into business school. So it was a great exposure that way. And I kind of built my basis for my career moving forward. Being able to really, because of the language barrier that my parents had coming here, I became really the focal point in front of customer relations, any kind of complaints, anything that needed translating, anytime Department of Labor or food and the FDA, anything came in, a lot of times I was there interpreting it, making sure and dealing with the process all the way along the way.
A lot of pressure for a chat for a teenager and a young adult for sure.
It's baptism by fire, to say the least. I was thrown to it and had to figure it all out, right? And
Hey,
um, listen, at that age, we didn't have Google. We didn't have things where we could just type in and look up something and figure out what it was. It was, okay, here's a form or here's this information you're giving me. Now, where do I look? Go to the library. We're looking at like microfiche. You're talking about very, very different types of innovations back then. Um, but it really led me into my career into HR, right? So that really built my basis, and I started doing recruiting fresh out and started going into finance and accounting recruiting. My entire family are all controllers in finance and accounting, so numbers have just come naturally for me anyway. So it was great to speak the language and be able to recruit back and forth. I had some great clients that really trusted me in terms of, we know you're exactly what we want, you know what we're looking for. If we need 100 temps, send them. Don't worry, we trust you. And I would just bill. So it was fantastic until 2008 hit. And then 2008 hit, and then all the housing market crashed.
and that was
Every ugh, it was devastating, right? So my clients, obviously, in all finance and accounting, nobody's hiring anymore. So I started developing little stress bald spots all around my head. I was 20 something years old, right? And I went to my barber and they were like, "What's wrong with your hair?" And I had all these bald spots because all my clients just dropped off and stopped hiring. So my money and all my commissions went it was nothing. So I walked into my office the very next day. I quit my job. Um, and I found a job internal, working as inside of another company doing their staffing and recruiting. And my hair came back almost immediately. So good decision on my behalf to go ahead and do that. Um, but really from there, I started growing in from recruiting, managing a staffing department, and going ahead and implementing recruiting and staffing different techniques to make sure that we were raising the manager's ability and accountability to hire individuals, right? It almost became seamless where people and store managers and were able to interview, select, hire, put everything through the process in the system and make it so that my job really wasn't really that needed anymore because managers were doing it, which then grew me a little bit more into HR. Started doing a little bit more of the HR generalist work inside of retail and the service industry. And then from there, I mean, I went into more management for manufacturing, tech startups, pharmaceutical, and I started heading departments for all of them also.
Getting a big breadth of depth there, not just into restaurant industry, you're going cross industry with all those human
I did.
resources and
So it was fantastic because I learned a lot of best practices, right,
pardon me?
Rose? I said I learned a lot of best practices from all the other industries, right? I worked in banking. So I know on the HR side for banking, for pharmaceuticals, for manufacturing, tech startups, all these different kind of businesses. And it's different because each business and industry has a different niche of how they want to do their HR and how it should look and what the best practices are for that industry. You're never going to find one book that just goes across every single place. So really, that's kind of what led me to where I am now. Now, how did I end up in Michigan? This is the question that everybody asks me. How did I end up in Traverse City, Michigan?
Before we went, I'm just going to say this. Traverse City is very lucky to have you. I've met you and you're a big contributor. And I'm just, before you jump into that, I just gotta say, whatever the man upstairs, he brought you up in Michigan and we need people like you, but now let everybody else know why.
Well, it's interesting enough. I've never even considered Traverse City. I've never been here before. My wife is from Grand Haven, Michigan, so a little bit further south. I've been there and I thought it was a great beach town. Loved it for the summer. Never really experienced a Michigan winter. Never thought I wanted to experience a Michigan winter. Now, I lived in New York, so I'm familiar with winters, but not really the lake effect kind of that happens or anything like that, where it gets really, really cold and icicles are sideways and horizontal. So I moved from New York in 2020 at the height of the pandemic down to the Carolinas. Got away from the cold, went to the warm, got away from how expensive it was, or I thought I did. And I moved to the Carolinas where it happened to be just as equally as expensive and now just very, very hot. And then I had my daughter in South Carolina, in Charleston, and it was about 104 degrees every single day for about a month. Could not get her outside. It was just way too hot. And my wife looked at me and said, "Why don't we get out of here? Do you want to give Michigan a shot?" I said, "Sure." I watched 2 drone videos of a flyby over Traverse City. I said, "It looks nice. Why don't we give it a shot?" Within moving here, within the first week, I knew I made the right decision. It reminded me so much of how my childhood was growing up, right? A small, tight-knit community that everybody knew everybody, well, for the most part, but that was so involved in the community. It was safe. Kids were playing without their parents, riding their bikes along the beach. Right? What that didn't happen in the city anymore.
Right.
So I was so happy to see that. And anytime outside, we looked at Michigan. I watched 2 drone videos on Traverse City, and we decided to move here. And I'm so glad that I did. After being here for a little bit and really engaging with the community, engaging with the just everybody around here, it really felt a lot like how I grew up in the town that I grew up in. And it was exactly the type of community that I wanted my daughter to grow up in also as well. It feels safe. It feels like everybody kind of just looks out for each other here. And that's 100% what I would love to stay in and give back to also as well.
Well, Jeff, one of the things that I hear from you a lot is you mention your family and your daughter a lot. And it just warms my heart because for me, it's family first and really giving everyone a great, life and a good, safe environment. And I think that's, you hit the nail on the head. Northern Michigan is really very, very engaging that way.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that because my daughter's name is Luna. Lune Group was very much coming out of my daughter just because I've always said when I had my daughter, a lot of my mindset kind of changed and focused to I want my daughter to come to me one day and say, I work at this company and I want to be proud of the company that she works at because I know that that company cares about employees, cares about the right initiatives, cares about the certain things, and has the right company culture that I would love for her to be in. And that's really what got me thinking in creating the group was to help companies create that culture, create that company where people will be proud to go to work. People will be proud to say, I work at this company. It doesn't make a difference if you're a Fortune 500, Fortune 50, or just a small little shop owned by a mom and pop. I've worked at all of them. I've worked Fortune 50 all the way down, or all the way down, all the way up, I guess, probably a better way. And I'll tell you, the most successful ones, the one thing they get right is company culture.
That's true. That is so true. Well, cool. And so before we jump into the origin story more about Luna, could you tell us, I just was curious because I come from, my family has folks from Asia. Where are you from in Asia?
So my parents are actually Taiwanese. So they were born in Taiwan. They lived in Keelung or Chilong, which is really a port city in Taiwan. My father was part of the Taiwanese Navy, so he served over there. So a lot of his interactions, and that's where my mom would wait at the dock of the port when my dad would come back on the boat in Keelung, and that's where they were. Um, I was lucky enough to see them in Keelung. We went back for a family visit to Taiwan, and I was lucky enough to see both my parents in Keelung together, visiting back for the first time before my dad passed away. So it was a really nice moment to remember.
Very cool. I love, love, love Asia. We spent a lot of time there in Japan, and I've been
Love Japan.
I've gone to the wall in Shanghai and never been lucky enough to get to see Taiwan, but
Gorgeous.
here I heard amazing things about that part of the world. And maybe someday.
If you like
Well,
Japan, if you like Japan, you'll love Taiwan. Taiwan has a lot of that.
I do. Wonderful. What a good story. So now let's jump into your very own company. You've worked for a lot of other businesses,
Mhm.
like big, small, great roots in the family business. Been there, done that too. So tell us about you venturing into your very own company.
Yeah, it's definitely been a roller coaster of rides and waves, but I will say that it's one of the most rewarding endeavors that I've ever gone down. Also, especially inside of HR and what I do, you see almost instantaneous rewards, and the gratification comes from not only the client. It just makes me feel better. Also, it's kind of why I stumbled into HR. I just naturally like to help people. It's just how I am. So this really kind of fits me. So, I mean, really, Lune Group was born out of, I mean, the simplest notion and realization, and that it was small businesses often struggle with HR because they don't have the resources, the time, the budget, or the expertise to really be able to navigate some of the complex employment issues that we have, especially nowadays with all the new different employment laws and changes that are coming from state to state, and they differ from state to state. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough in California, they differ from county to county. So even within the same state, they'll differ. Your laws will differ in what you have to offer to your employees. So that's a lot for a company to navigate through. And I always said, it's I saw so many owners and business owners juggling just compliance, hiring, workplace culture, all these things on their own, hiring, firing, interviewing, and it literally took them away from focusing on what they needed to do, which was how to grow their business and how to grow their company, right? Every business owner got in there because they wanted to grow their business. But they always say, I can't because I'm stuck doing the day to day. right? Whether it's whatever it is that they're doing, they're stuck doing the day to day. By the time they get home, then they spend time with family, they go put their kids down. Do they want to jump back on the computer and spend the next 6 hours again working to go ahead and solicit sales calls and do all those things to grow and expand the business out and make more revenue? Sometimes we lose it and we just don't have the time and we lose that. And that's really where I said, okay, well, that's what they need to focus on is growing. So I designed Lune Group to be a fractional HR group. And what I mean by fractional HR group is it's an on-demand, flexible HR partner where you can go ahead and contact, and you don't need a full, robust HR department. You don't need every single aspect completed for you. You can use fractions of what you need. So let's say I need an employee handbook. I don't need anything else. Good, let's work on an employee handbook, right? You need help with employee relations. You need help with some of, making sure your personnel files are up to date, your payrolling, your time and attendance, strategic HR work. That's where you can focus, and you can focus each one on it instead of going ahead and paying for an entire HR department. You can minimize your costs. It's most of the small businesses. What I've come to find out is that they don't really need a full-blown HR department. But a lot of times you have these owners that say, I need an HR department, so let me hire a generalist for $60,000, and they need a payroll admin for $30,000, and then we need one maybe admin. So now you've had three people, you're spending, I don't know, upwards of over six figures when you don't really need them, right? One, a system can figure out most of that. There's innovation, there's ways to do it, and none of those will give you strategic ROI of HR, right? So whether it's really handling the compliance, creating better hiring strategies, improving workplace culture, making, we make HR much more manageable and effective, and really without any of the unnecessary bureaucracy, right? For Michigan businesses, especially, we help navigate the unique, like we talked earlier, Michigan has such a unique mix of industries here where you have tourism, hospitality, manufacturing, tech companies now also as well, education companies. You have all these different industries within one state. So you're not going to be able to use a blanketed HR approach for every single one of them. That's why we have tailored approaches, tailored HR solutions that can work for each one of those industries, right? We have best practices from so many different industries, from Fortune 50 to Fortune 500 companies. In every one of these industries, we've had the best practices and experience in. So we bring a lot of value and a value proposition to the table that way.
Fantastic. Well, I was curious if you would take us through, let's say, just in problem a client might have, that you've been able to help them out and figure out how you kind of look at it from maybe a new or innovative different way. How can you give us a little bit of insight into, like, peel that onion back a little? What's that like
Yeah.
with the
I,
client?
I would love to, actually, and if I wasn't able to, I don't know if I would have been very successful in my job before. But yeah, I mean, so the way that we really use, and I always say, a lot of times small businesses tend not to lean towards technology, right? They say, I don't want to learn a new system. I already know this system. It already works. It is what it is. It's fine. And they have that resistance to change, and especially inside of the tech sector. And then I sit down with them and I start breaking down. I start asking for different things. Let me see your payroll records. Let's see where you're tracking your time off. Let's see where you're tracking your mandatory sick time that you have to track. And all of a sudden, it's this Excel spreadsheet, it's that Excel spreadsheet. I have that Access database. I'm inside of QuickBooks. And it's about 7 to 8 different platforms and different things that they're pulling from. And the amount of time that they're doing to keep up with that is almost like you could solve a lot more problems by going ahead and using some of the tech also as well. So, we had a client that was a fast growing startup. They were struggling with high turnover and inconsistent onboarding. Honestly, for any startup that's fast moving and fast growing, these are common pitfalls where you're going to have high turnover and you're going to have inconsistent onboarding because you're moving quick, you're testing fast, and you're correcting fast also. And this is just what happens. But if you know anything about turnover, every time you have an employee leave, you're termed, whatever it is, average is about $35,000 to $40,000. Now that's right for every time somebody leaves. That's time that it takes to onboard them, more training, finding more people, somebody to cover the overtime that's probably needed when that person leaves. So I always say onboarding, recruiting, it starts there. That's really how important it is. So we implemented a digital onboarding toolkit, right? That really automated their paperwork. It clarified their job expectations. It incorporated company culture from day one on the onboarding toolkit for employees. So when employees came onto the job, they knew what the expectations were. They knew what they should be doing. They knew where to go to if they had a question. It made everything so simplistic for them and where they could find things that, and I don't know if you ever felt it, but I've definitely felt that as a new hire before, where I'm sitting there going, I don't know what I should be doing right now. Should I be like, what should, it's day one and I'm not sure what I should be doing. We really help doing that, right?
Isn't that awkward
It is. It's an awkward because you don't even know who to ask. Like,
on here, or maybe I don't belong here kind of feeling, like maybe,
right.
yeah, because they're already nervous.
And you don't want that. And most of the time it's because everybody's so busy doing their job that they just don't have time or they just kind of forget one small thing, which is okay. But that's not a great introduction and reception for a new hire. And that sets the tone. So we put all this in place. We simplified the process. We made it much more engaging for the employee. We reduced the turnover in the first 90 days by 30%. We improved employee retention overall.
Oh,
And it wasn't
30%.
about, yeah, 30%. It
My
wasn't about reinventing the wheel though, right? It was about just being able to use smart and practical innovations to make HR more efficient and employee friendly, right? And that's what people wanted. They want to go to work and have things be of ease, not add and make things more like more difficult for them. So that was probably a good one. I mean, we saved money in ESTA.
startup. And if you are, and I know right where your clients' heads are at, because you're worrying about so many other things and you want to bring in the best people you can, but you almost are like, good, got that done. I hired that guy. Now I can go do my next problem. And no, you can't just like one and done that. That's not the way it works.
No, I mean, if you don't have a bench or if you don't have a funnel of candidates and employees, what every employer reaches is they lose one person and they go, oh man, I need to hire somebody really, really quickly.
Then they
And
have to
they,
make, oh,
they make
so
bad decisions.
recruiting as well.
Hmm?
You help with recruiting.
Absolutely. Recruiting was always my bread and butter. It's how I started. And recruiting is having a process and a strategy on how you want to recruit and hire is so crucial. That's your first branding image. Your first branding image is your recruiting. How candidates see your company starts there. And I'll tell you this, if you go through a bad recruiting and interview process, you're going to tell somebody and they're going to tell somebody. And that is not a good way of maintaining any kind of good culture or company representation inside of community.
I hear you. That's so insightful. Thank you for that, Jeff.
Of
So,
course.
leverage technology. You've mentioned it a few times.
Mhm.
You have these disparate systems all over the place. Do you sort of try to bring it together?
Yeah, I mean, so for Lune Group itself, I mean, technology is a game changer for HR, right? I mean, we're embracing it in ways that make life easier for small business and business owners. So really where we're venturing right now in technology is we're looking to develop AI-driven HR support, right? That helps answer common compliance, employee relation questions in real time for the employee, right? Which reduces the constant need for back and forths. It also reduces the amount of time a supervisor or a manager has to deal with a common question that most likely an employee could find in a handbook somewhere or in a policy. We're going ahead and building that component so that we can take that away from our supervisors and our managers so they can focus on what needs to actually be done for the company, where employees will have the accountability and they can talk to it. But there's a lot inside of there that we're looking to do to streamline that process and just make it so much easier all around.
I think that's exciting.
It is very exciting. I mean, I'm working with some fellow oopsers on that one also, so we should talk about that one day. But it's definitely something that we're looking at. I mean, we're also working on innovative hiring methods, right? Like I just kind of talked about, is how to help small businesses screen for candidates faster, make effective or hire more effectively, making sure that they find the right person without wasting a whole lot of time and streamlining that process. It's not just about some tech innovation. There's innovative ways of looking at things on how we can do and really attack a problem and come up with a solution that's completely innovative, hasn't been done before, fits your model and fits your business, and ultimately saves and hopefully saves your bottom line also as well.
That is so cool. Yeah, I want to hear more about that. That sounds like an important space. Everything is being AI'd these days. And so I'm glad to hear you guys are on board with that as well. So
here's the one thing, if you don't mind, the one other innovative thing in technology that I want to push all small businesses for is data analytics, right? Is the amount of data that is being collected inside of a company at all times, especially inside of their personnel department. That data, viewed correctly, looked at by a strategic set of eyes, it helps a predictive model of turnover risks, helps identify the opportunities where you can boost employee engagement, help create the culture where you have problematic issues before you get it, right? The goal, at least for Lune Group, is to take what used to be a very reactive HR model and turn it into a proactive, strategic decision-making model. And that's how you get your ROI from HR these days. It's not your administrative work. It's nothing like that. It's how does HR help my bottom line? How does it help me reduce my labor costs, help me reduce costs, and make sure that I'm optimizing my revenue and my labor force? That's what HR should be doing. So by leveraging tech, we're hoping to help all small business be able to do that and maybe be able to operate on a smaller workforce or hire more efficiently so they have the right workforce to be there.
Very important. So the big data and analytics are very critical, and I'm so excited that you see that as well. That's really important. And how do your business owners use the data?
So that's the thing is now, so I have to change how they view data. A lot of it was they weren't even collecting proper data, right?
Yes.
So it depends on the data that you're out there collecting. So, engagement surveys or company culture surveys, things like that, that you're taking the pulse from your employees. The questions that you ask.
Kind of that thing too, maybe?
Yeah. Yeah, we do a lot of that. And the questions that you ask, though, you have to make sure that they're not biased. They don't lead into it. I've had a lot of CEOs and business owners that put out a survey that says, did you enjoy the company party that we had last Christmas? That doesn't give you any information that you need. That's not data driven. There's different metrics that you want to hit, different ways to scale it and value and assign a point system to it. So at the end of your survey, you know what areas are problematic and what areas you're doing really well in. And that's how you go ahead and use your data to tell a story. HR data tells the narrative of your company.
That's so important. That's so insightful. Well, what's next for Lune Group?
Oh, I love that question, and I'm so excited you asked me because it's such an exciting part for me here. As we're looking ahead, and innovation in HR consulting means staying ahead of workplace trends, right? While keeping things practical for the business we serve. One of our key focuses always at Lune Group is making sure that we're expanding our on-demand HR support model, right? More ways to support businesses, more ways and making it more accessible for small businesses that need that kind of guidance without the overhead of an entire HR department. Right? We want to keep costs low. We know that as business owners. Obviously, we're looking to develop those AI-powered tools to help streamline a lot of that processes that we just talked about, such as like the talent acquisition, employee engagement, things like that, and compliance. which I think is always going to be so critical. I mean, there's a wave of AI. You know that also. I've heard you talk about it, Rose, and you know that it used properly can help really change the game and make things a lot more efficient for us. Beyond that, honestly, I'm so rooted, and I think you heard me talk about this, but I'm so rooted in Lune Group's commitment to Michigan's business ecosystem. We're really looking to partner with local organizations, maybe some education initiatives, um, to help develop the next generation of talent, right? For me, as what I see inside of a city like Traverse City, a state like Michigan, where it's so much small business, 98% is small business, a program where we can get students into the work population, right? As an alternative, they can learn practical work. They can learn applicable work practices, come out of school having work knowledge, have experience already. It can help solve a lot of the staffing issues that we see inside of the cities also as well, where we can have a whole set of a workforce body that can go out there and learn about the business, work hours also help inside of that, see different aspects. It creates innovation inside of the head of how do we tackle problems, bring these kids in young. Like I would love to start looking into something like that by create like so that we can create stronger pathways from education to employment, right? Helping businesses find great employees and also really helping students gain real world experience, right? Um, Ultimately, I see Lune Group as more than just an HR consulting firm. We really want to be a partner in growth for Michigan businesses, ensuring that they have not only the right resources, but also the right talent strategies they need to really kind of thrive in this ever-changing workplace that we're always moving along with.
Yeah, and that's so helpful, not only to the businesses and communities, but it gives the students and the early early adoption into the business world, and they can see from a person perspective rather than from an HR perspective, because they are people first,
Yeah,
and then they can join a business, understand it, and be more have that business acumen at an earlier age. And I
yeah.
think that's another reason why we're so lucky to have you with us in this Northern Michigan community. So tell us a little bit about you say that you like the community. You mentioned that we both are at Oops. Tell us what your thoughts are about Michigan embracing your business.
So far, I mean, I think it's a change. Don't get me wrong. I understand that technology and changing the way that we've done things and seeing like, is it really needed? How do we really, because you have a lot of small businesses that haven't used HR before, right? They kind of just kind of do some of the minimums and stuff. Sometimes they don't know if they're compliant or not. Luckily, no employee has ever said anything, right? Um, but the need is here, and I can tell you that from just looking at just reading the Traverse City papers and things like that, and hearing about some of the local businesses that got slammed with employment law fines because they weren't doing pay right, they weren't paying employees correctly.
Well, I was
Uh,
the other day and they were talking about the new sick time reporting. And I
mhm.
asked the question just innocently, and I said, how is this being sort of policed by the state of Michigan, that it's their adherence? And they said, it's being policed by employees self-reporting.
Correct.
And
So most
that,
of these policies,
that's such a bad culture. You don't want to put a system in place that's going to pit the employee and the employer at odds, like gotcha. So that just made me kind of sad when I heard the government say that it was going to be like that. I know that you have a fantastic perspective on this. Can you share with us your response
yeah.
to something like that?
Absolutely. What I would tell everybody is that if you have an employee that is playing the gotcha, and I'll be honest with you, most companies have one or two of these, right? It's about how you communicate and how you go ahead and effectively communicate the change in policy. Now, what a lot of employers didn't understand, and I did this for several clients here in Michigan, was when ESTA rolled out, we had to look at it and say, It doesn't mean you just have to give 72 hours of sick time to your employees. Let's look at what you already give them. Let's see, do we have to give more? Do we give less? What do we do and how do we structure it so that you give what's needed, you're compliant with the state, and your employees don't feel like you're taking things away from them, or you're giving them a little bit of something. And we literally saved companies money because they were already giving time off. We had to just change how it looked. And then the communication to the employees was just about, this is being done for companies that don't usually give time off to their employees, right? If you are a employer that you give no time off to your employees, they're sick, they're whatever it is, doesn't make a difference, you get no time off, you're probably one of the reasons why states pass these laws, right? Because that's not fair. Let's look at it from just a human perspective, right? It's just like, I'm sick. I can't come to work. Do you want me to get everybody else sick? Do you, or somebody,
Bills.
yeah. Like, so now I can't, yeah, exactly. Now I can't come in and I don't get paid and I got to worry about my bills. And like, now it's just not fair. So a lot of times when companies are already kind of doing that, it was just changing, looking at how we had to look at the law, look at how it needs to be compliant. And we say, hey, we're already halfway there. Exactly. It doesn't need to be all for one. So we were able to change a lot of that and really be able to say, hey, we're going to save you money because you don't need to give any more, actually. You're going to save time on it. And the employees were like, oh, well, you already give me time. Oh, I get why the state's doing this. This is not really like, oh, we need an extra time off. This is just for those companies. I get it. I work for a company that already takes care of me, that already gives me that time off benefit. We're good.
Nice.
And you may have, yeah.
I love the way you approach that. That is so, and I just have to say that it was foreboding, but I think that it kind of, because of your feedback and getting some more information from you, I know I leaned on you a lot, asking you a lot of questions about that, and it really gave us a sense of well-being down here in Cadillac. And I know you work not just in Traverse City. I heard you were going to different parts of Michigan. Can you share with us your geographical reach in Michigan?
Yeah, so my geographical reach is really as far as a plane will get me, or my car will get me at this point right now. No, I mean we are obviously looking to expand outside of Traverse City. The entire state of Michigan is within commutable distance at one point or another, right? At the same time, with technology, it's always easy to go ahead and do everything elsewhere. So I am more national in anywhere, New York, California. I know the tough states, right? I know the states that have all the tough employment laws, which makes every other state, it's pretty easy. It's not too bad. So it's always those hard states. And luckily, I've worked inside and out on all those states previously from inside. So the laws are pretty much there.
Well, great. So before we wrap this up, I want to ask you, is there anything you'd like to share with our community, with the folks on the podcast before I ask you the last question?
The only thing I want to say is I really speak a lot about this is transparency. And as a business owner and even as an employee, I would tell you that transparency is key in every work conversation, right? The more transparent you are as a manager, as a supervisor, as an employer to your employees of what your expectations are, what you want to see, what you like, what you don't like. I mean, all of those things only helps to build a better culture. At the end of the day, you don't want everybody to work for your company. You want the right people to work for your company. And that's how you build your company and how you portray yourself. It's okay for not every single person to say, I want to work there. It's okay to have a company culture where people say, I don't align to that. That's okay, because when the people that you find do align to it, you'll have loyalty, you have a worker that's there for longer, you have a much more productive employee and work staff. So it's okay to do that.
That's very
Transparency, 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 transparency.
reassuring. I love that. You know, it's not for everybody. But with the right person, it's magic. Sweet. So in about a year, I'm sure Lune Group will be different, growing, lots of changes. Will you help my audience understand that by joining me again in about a year?
Oh my God, I would love to, Rose. Absolutely. I would love to give you the updates of where we are and what we're doing for Michigan. Absolutely.
Right. Well, let's book that. And with that, I'm going to say, see you next time. Bye.
Bye.